So, what's new in your world this week?
Doing some songwriting, as always. But new, not a whole lot. Not a
No.
whole lot. No.
So, people don't realize that we pre-record some of these. We don't necessarily record them in order or release them in order. However, the Iowa caucuses happened, and Trump
Yes.
handily won. I don't think anyone needed to even pay attention to it because it was.
Yeah, you didn't need to look into a crystal ball. There's enough vermin out there.
Well, it's not even so much vermin. You know what I mean? Like, I don't want people to think.
I just wanted to use the word since Trump used it.
Ah. Is he polluting your blood?
Luckily, no. I'm already filled with enough piss and vinegar for anybody.
Yeah, ain't that the fucking truth?
I don't need to. I'll walk that back. I'm sorry for using the word vermin. I don't want to be associated with Hitler.
Who does?
See
Who
what
does?
I did there?
Yeah. Who does? Who wants to be associated with Hitler? But it's like everyone. So I don't really participate much on social media, but I do read Twitter. I try not to comment because I don't.
All I want is peace. Peace. A little piece of Poland. A little piece.
Wonderful Mel Brooks reference right there.
Yes.
So everyone's hair was on fire, but at the end of it, after they had some time to think about it, X or Twitter or whatever you want to call it, kind of calmed down. Some of the raw numbers came in, and people were saying, well, look, he it was only 14% of the Republican Party even voted, and he didn't even get 50% of that. So there's a lot of back and forth, and I think, to be honest with you, the people who are talking about that are saying it, and not only because I'm sure it's true. I mean, I don't know what the real numbers are, but at the end of the day, let's say that that's correct, and that only 14% of Republicans actually showed up, whether it was because of the weather, whether it was because they felt Trump was, invincible and he didn't need their, vote or caucusing, whatever. But let's say that that's all true, and give the benefit of the doubt that those numbers that they're quoting are real. With that being said, what I think they're doing is they're trying to appease themselves and comfort themselves in it. No matter how you look at it, no matter what the numbers are, Trump won, and he won by the largest margin that's ever happened in Iowa. And to me, that gives him momentum going into New Hampshire. And the other side of it are people that are pulling their hair out. Okay, so I'm just talking about like the non-Trumpers. So you got the Trumpers are thrilled. They're pushing forward. They're happy that he kicked ass in Iowa. They're anticipating he's going to kick ass in New Hampshire, and he might. I think he probably will. If it were me calling the race right now, I would say we don't even need Super Tuesday because Trump's going to be the nominee. Then you got the other people who, like the people who are posting, well, it was only 14%. That's nothing, and blah blah blah. Okay, that's nothing. But he still has the momentum. And then you've got the other people who are just like, they can't believe it. They're freaking out. They're having a hard time understanding, how is it possible that somebody like him, they can't see through it, and blah, 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 right? So all of this happens, and I'm going through different podcasts and looking for something interesting to listen to because I've had enough with the political debate, okay? So I'm looking through the different podcasts, and I see Taylor Sheridan, who is the creator of Yellowstone, 1893, all these different shows. And I'm a fan.
Was also a part of Sons of Anarchy.
Oh, was he? I
He
didn't
was an
know that.
actor. Yeah,
I did
he
not.
was the deputy sheriff who turned into the sheriff when the sheriff retired.
I didn't know that. But I'm
Yeah.
regardless. I'm a fan of his writing. I'm a fan of his work. And in the course of the conversation, they were. I don't even know. I don't even remember necessarily how this came up, but they were talking about the way the world is now, essentially. And Rogan brings up, what's his name? Yuri. I gotta check this. Yuri. He spoke about this guy a number of times. Um,
Oh yeah, there's
there you go. Oh, what the hell is his name? Yuri. Anyways, it was like from
Brezhnev or something.
yeah,
Yeah,
Yuri.
1984. The
Exactly. And
KGB.
so he's spoken about this and how um, Rogan has spoken about this number of times and how he basically was explaining how propaganda works and how you get to the kids, you get into the schools, you get into the professions, you basically you are the parasite that kills the big bad beast of America, but you do it quietly and from within. And once you start that rolling and you start explaining to these kids that communism just hasn't been done correctly and you create these divisions and you know basically it's just divide, make everything a fucking issue. And before he actually got a chance to go into that, Taylor Sheridan says, have you ever heard from 1965 Paul Harvey, if I were the devil, right? Now, they played it. I don't know if, we can get away with that. So I'm just going to read it. I'm going to read pieces, and as we go through, we can talk about it or whatever. But I was floored. I mean, I've been a Paul Harvey fan for a long time. You know what I mean? I dig Paul Harvey. I've always, heard his clips and stuff like that. I think he was a great broadcaster.
And now the rest of the story.
That was my favorite part, right? I loved it. So apparently, this is something that
he was a guy who wrote music in an RV in the middle of the woods. And now
the rest of the story. So I'm going to read this to you because I listened to it and I highly recommend anyone who has any interest in like it's almost prophetic. All right.
Yeah.
So here it is.
But is it prophetic from a self-fulfilling prophecy standpoint?
Well, let me read it to you and then you can tell me. Okay.
All right.
So
I keep interrupting.
That's all right. If I were the devil,
I'm going to interrupt you.
You motherfucker. You are such a cock.
Go ahead.
Oh, you sure?
I want to interrupt you.
No. Probably. No. Now.
No.
All right. You ready?
Yeah.
If I were the devil, if I were the prince of darkness, I'd want to engulf the whole world in darkness. And I'd have 1/3 of its real estate and 4/5 of its population. But I wouldn't be happy until I had seized the ripest apple on the tree, thee. So I'd set about, however necessary, to take over the United States. I'd subvert the churches first. I'd begin with a campaign of whispers. With the wisdom of a serpent, I would whisper to you as I whispered to Eve, do as you please. To the young, I would whisper that the Bible is a myth. I would convince them that man created God instead of the other way around. I would confide that what's bad is good and what's good is square. And
stop right there. The premise of all that, the idea ultimately, because everything else is just filler. But the very first paragraph of that implies that Christianity is a myth. Now, my
It
question,
implies that it's a myth.
yeah,
Okay.
that the Satan is going to make sure that one of the methods of taking over is to subvert by making everybody believe that Christianity is just a myth. You follow me?
Yep, I'm with you.
My first comment is, okay, it's not a myth. Prove it. Prove it.
That Christianity's not a myth.
Yeah. It's asking somebody to prove a negative.
Yeah, I
Basically.
totally agree with you. I mean, in the sense of I don't buy into it either. However, I think if you think about the time, 1965, okay?
Yes.
Clearly the United States
Flower
was,
power is starting to set in. The United States is the head of the table for the world, basically.
but you also have some bad shit happening. You know what I mean?
Yes.
So you've got I'd have to verify the years, but you have, assassinations happening, whether it's JFK, RFK, MLK, all
MLK was 69 or 70.
was it? Okay. That was the one I wasn't sure about. But there was this sense of disruption that was going on in the middle of the 60s. You had the beginning
Correct.
you had the beginning of the hippie movement. You
Beginning
started
of Vietnam.
you had all these things that were kind of in their works if they hadn't already happened. We knew that we were going to go to the moon, but we didn't make it. We didn't make it to space first. Russia was beating us in the space race. We weren't going to have any of that. I mean, there were all these kind of tensions that were building, and you, even if all you did was listen to the change in music, which I think is very, or at least in the 20th century, is very telling. So you went from big bands, you know what I mean, and then you end up
I'm
before.
sorry, I don't mean to laugh. You're talking about space, and all I could think in my head is, "Man, they sent that damn dog up, this wacky cosmonauts. That poor fucking
Poor
dog.
fucking dog. Poor fucking
What must
monkey.
have he been thinking?
The monkey
You know,
too.
they put a ball in this little group. Okay, I get to go get the ball. Why are they closing that up? How am I gonna give them the ball back? Hey, why is everything shaking? Hey, why is everything moving so fast? Whoa, this is messed up.
Man,
Nobody came to
did the
get him.
dog make it? I don't think the dog made it.
No, they left him.
Yeah, in space, right?
Yeah,
That's what I thought.
imagine what that poor dog must have thought. I was such a bad dog. Please
They
send me
sent me
out
to
of here.
fucking space with nothing but a tennis ball.
The poor dog.
That poor fucking
Where
dog.
am I gonna pee? I'm
Oh,
gonna have
I
to
don't think
poop
that
where I
ran.
sleep.
I don't think that ran through the dog's mind at all. I think the dog's like, well, I guess this is happening. But getting back to the point that
Where's
you
the
know,
zipper on this suit?
you start, you
Damn it, I
start,
don't have any thumbs.
you start in the 40s where you've got a lot of big band, and that big band kind of music continued on, and it was familiar, but it was always kind of your parents'
Yes.
music. And then the 50s come, you start getting rock and roll. But you're going from, big band to, like Little Richard, and then you start getting into Elvis, and then you get into the Beatles, and the Beatles start to morph into something different than, Love, Love Me Do. All of a sudden it's, Cuckoo, Cachoo. There's a change.
What a great rhyme. You're
Thank
a
you.
poet, you didn't even know it.
I didn't even realize it when I said it, to be honest with you. And then I heard it in the headset. I'm like, oh, fuck. People are going to think that's planned. It's not. So
We're
there was,
just that damn good, folks.
yeah. So there's a change that's happening. You know what I mean? And I can see where somebody of his age at that time could have felt like, okay, the world is changing faster than I can keep up. There's, this must be end of times. And I think you also had at that point in time, you had more of people doing things because that's what you did rather than, oh, you know what, I'm not going to fucking do that. You know what I mean? Like people think, oh no, there was never any drugs back in the 40s and 50s. Yeah, there was. There was a lot of heroin. There was a lot of heroin. There was a lot of drugs being done, a lot of alcoholics, a lot of all that stuff. You know what I mean? So it did exist. But what didn't exist was stepping out of line in public necessarily. So everyone kind of kept their own private problems private and tried to hide it and maybe would reach out to their pastor or whatever or their priest. There was not, it was more of a time of listening to people tell you what the Bible said rather than encouraging you to read the Bible. And I can see where he's coming from in the point of view of everything's changing, and it seems like the kids they're not going to church and they're not buying the church argument anymore. That seems like something the devil would get them to do. They're rebelling against social norms. They're growing their hair long instead of wearing it in a crew cut. You know what I mean? Like they're wearing round glasses instead of normal glasses, and I mean, like there was all these little tiny things that were happening that.
Why do they all look like Ben Franklin? What's
Yeah,
going on?
exactly. So it was I would say the 60s for somebody that was an adult in
Great idea.
what?
We want to rebel. Let's all start wearing powdered wigs.
There we go. Now we're talking. You don't have to wake up early, wash your hair, and nothing. Just slap on that
Nothing,
old
just slap it
powdered
on.
wig. But I think
Put
that
one in my pants and let it hang out the zipper.
okay, thank you for that visual.
You're welcome.
But I do. I think that
just for you.
I think that this is coming from a sense of fear, and I think that every generation goes through this to some degree.
Fear of something that is different.
Fear of something that's different, and we swing from one way to the other generationally. So the 60s, the answer to the 60s was the 80s. Okay, so you had the 50s where everyone was starting to kind of come out of the 40s and kind of feeling a little bit different about how they were going to, what kind of music they were going to listen to, how they were going to dress, what they were going to look like, how they were going to wear their hair, what they were going to buy into as reality, and what they were going to call out as bullshit. And for somebody who was already an adult in the 50s, and when I say an adult, I mean anyone who was already like out of college in the mid to late 50s, which I'm sure Harvey was, and then going into his career and seeing these things as a broadcaster, seeing all these different things. I mean, at that point in time, he had dealt, I mean, you had, during that period of time, you had, the Red Scare, you had McCarthyism, you had all these different things that were going on.
There was a great movie quote that sticks in my head quite often. Dennis, what's his name? Actor who's in Speed, Blue Velvet.
Not Quaid.
No. Older.
Hopper? Dennis Hopper?
Yes, Dennis Hopper, who in a scene in the movie, I can't remember what movie it is, but he says, just wait, because the 90s are going to make the 60s look like the 50s.
And that's true.
Yeah.
In many ways. So I get where he's coming from by saying, based on what he knows to be true at the time, the only thing that can be causing this is the devil. You know what I mean? But there's also, like I said, there's almost, as we go through this, you're going to see like, there's a lot of shit in here where it's like, oh, I recognize that today. Now the question becomes, do I recognize that today because that's the reality of today? Or because I'm of a certain age that I look and I see things aren't the way I think or I thought they should be. You know what I mean?
Well, there is always going to be an aspect of cultural and generational differences. Things that we seem as, we look at through the glasses of today's world
Mm-hmm.
that are 2020, looking back, um, 20 years, it's going to be different again.
And that's the thing.
Change,
I think that this
change is
happens.
inevitable.
I think that
The
this
only,
honestly happens every 20, 30 years. I think that every 20, 30 years, there's discord and discomfort within. And it's usually at times where we are complaining because we really don't have anything to be afraid of. You know what I mean? We're looking for something to pitch and piss and moan about. You know what I mean? And maybe that's just natural progression. Maybe that's just the way the world works. Maybe it's just how we evolve. All those things could be true. But let me continue so you can kind of get a feel for what I'm talking about. And the old I would teach to pray after me, our Father which art in Washington. Well, that's kind of fucking Fox News now, isn't it?
I don't mean to interrupt, but we were talking about generational change. And again, a line popped into my head that you're going to also know from the band Rush, Tom Sawyer,
Mm-hmm.
where they say um, changes aren't permanent, but change is.
Correct. Exactly. Okay. So now our and the old I would teach to pray after me, our Father which art in Washington. Now you could say that when I said Fox News, that it's actually the opposite. However, it
Yes.
depends. It depends on whether or not the Republican is in office. No matter who the Republican is, they'll defend him. But when it's not the Republican, they crucify him. All right.
Yes.
So, all right, moving on. And then I'd get organized. I'd educate authors in how to make lurid literature exciting so that anything else would appear dull and uninteresting. I'd threaten TV with dirtier movies and vice versa. I'd peddle narcotics to whom I could. I would sell alcohol to ladies and gentlemen of distinction. I tranquilize the rest with pills. If I were the devil, soon have families at war with themselves, churches at war with themselves, and nations at war with themselves, until each in its turn was consumed, and with promises of higher ratings, I'd have mesmerizing media fanning the flames. If I were the devil, I would encourage schools to refine young intellects, but neglect to discipline emotions. Just let those run wild until before you know it, you'd have to have drug sniffing dogs and metal detectors at every schoolhouse door. Within a decade, I'd have prisons overflowing. I'd have judges promoting pornography. Soon I could evict God from the courthouse, then from the schoolhouse. Okay? So that's pretty fucking powerful.
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack there.
There's a shit ton to unpack there. Okay? So just for the sake of let me get back to the beginning. I'd educate the authors in making lurid literature. Okay. And the whole bit about
Sorry,
TV.
my entire RV just shook.
Oh,
So,
did it?
Sasquatch, I tell you, Sasquatch.
Obviously. So I would make lurid literature exciting so that anything else would appear dull and uninteresting. I'd threaten TV with dirtier movies and vice versa. I'd peddle narcotics to whom I could. I'd sell alcohol to ladies and gentlemen of distinction. I'd tranquilize the rest with pills. I'm pretty sure that was pandemic. I mean, like,
Well,
you know what I mean? Like,
yes. However, this shows that those have always been problems. If
exactly.
you have money to burn, that's not a generational issue. That is a human issue. Every society, since man began and crawled up the beach of destiny
Okay, but
millions of years ago,
but
they would lick frogs to get their high.
yeah, no. That's a bold motherfucker that goes, you know what? I'm gonna lick
But
this. I'm gonna lick this fucking frog. I'm gonna.
dare
I
you to
know.
lick that. I dare you to lick that. I'll
Uh,
give you 3 rocks to lick that.
Make it 4 and it's a deal, you fucker.
Oh,
What do you
you're
think?
on.
You think I'm cheap? So, but if you think about it, yes, drugs have always and pills have always been administered and doled out, whether it was legally by doctors or on the streets.
You ever see the video of the squirrel eating the fermented fruit?
No.
Yeah, it's getting fucked up as it's eating the fermented fruit and just
Zones out completely.
awesome.
Elephants do that too.
For those at home, I was starting to slowly lean sideways.
So, but what I'm getting at here is that there is, to some degree, an increase in all of that. You know, tranquilizing the fucking masses with oxycodone. Okay. And if you can't,
Ketamine.
what's that?
Ketamine.
Ketamine.
Ketamine. Yeah.
Uh,
Vicodin.
Vicodin. Any of the opioids. Okay, you could say. But beyond that,
the entire opioid crisis.
You could also back that up and say antidepressants.
Yes.
Because once you're on them, basically that's a lifetime prescription. You know what I mean? They know they're going to make their money one way or another. And that's what kills me with that. And that's why I say, like, that particularly, when coming out of the pandemic, there were more people that became alcoholics during the pandemic than at any point in recent history. It was a general malaise of, how am I going to get fucked up enough to deal with the news that I'm going to have to watch and the updates on this shit? And through that, you had, because of online, you had this opportunity for, whether it's lurid, okay, whether it was pornography. I mean, at one point during the pandemic, if I'm not mistaken, I think Pornhub opened it up as a gold free. So like the gold subscriptions or whatever was free to anyone who downloaded their app. That they
I had no idea.
Yeah. So at the time, I could be wrong. It was a news story I read, and I'm vaguely remembering it. But I have it here on my phone. Oh no, that's the app. But you know what I'm saying? Like, there's this definitive time that we went through with the pandemic and the lockdown, where that happened. Okay, it happened before that.
There's a lot during the lockdown that I did not experience. One of them is staying home because my job was essential. Our entire household, it was essential.
I went through the same thing.
So I didn't get that wonderful vacation.
Yeah, I didn't either.
Wish I could have.
Yeah, it would have been great. No, I didn't get that either.
My employer was like, "Oh, you have COVID?" Because I did get COVID. Well, no, I did not get COVID. I was exposed to it and I had symptoms, but I did not have COVID. But they still wanted me to sit at home. And my employer even still was like, "When can you come back?"
Yeah.
And yeah, I wish I could have stayed home. I could have gotten so much done.
Oh, bitch, please. Like, you would have gotten anything done more than...
Oh, I would have. Oh, I would have.
So I just think that that's interesting that here in 1965, he's talking about what's going on. And I mean, as far
But
as I
is it
know,
really, you know, prophetically speaking, is it really a prophecy, if you will? Because ultimately, this means that every generation goes through this. Nothing has changed.
well, hold on. What I'm saying is it's possible that every generation goes through this. And if
Yes.
you look from 1965 to today, you could make that argument at least in that time frame. I don't know that you can make that argument prior to 1950, or at least not to this degree. So, as an example, where he says, let me get to it here, have families at war with themselves, churches at war with themselves, and nations at war with themselves. Come on. That's exactly what's going on in the fucking country ever since the pandemic. That's what's been
Before the
going.
pandemic, too.
What's that?
Before the pandemic, too.
Yeah, it was. The argument could be made that this goes. So there's some that would say it started in 2016 when Trump got elected. I think that that's bullshit. I think it got amplified.
It got amplified, but it's always been going on.
Oh, no, I wouldn't disagree with you. It has. I mean, I can remember fucking Thanksgiving where Mom and Uncle Joe would go to fucking town over the fact that he voted for Nixon, right? So, like,
Yeah.
Mom was pissed he voted for Nixon. and I think Dad was even talking about voting for Nixon, and she never let that shit go. I remember...
I remember that.
As a kid going, it was a long time ago. But in reality, it wasn't a long time ago. You know what I mean? So, like, I was probably 5. So we're talking 1975-ish, right? And...
Wow, you're old.
Yeah, I am. Fucking...
You're welcome.
I don't have wet
You're
fart.
welcome.
I don't have wet farts anymore. I have dusty ones. But the point being is, like, as a kid, I'm thinking, why are we arguing about this? Why is there tension here? Why? So it's always been there. But it would be there for a moment, and then it would disperse. And there was a time growing up where it was like, you didn't talk about religion or politics. Like, that was not polite conversation. You just didn't do it. You might know that your neighbor had different political views than you, or your family member had different political views than you, but you're really, especially on holidays and shit like that, you weren't supposed to talk about that, you know? And if you look at where we're at today, families are at war with themselves. Now, again, I'm not somebody who's going to say, oh, it's all Trump's fault. That's bullshit. This has been going on forever. However,
Trump just made it louder.
It did get louder, and it became more frequent. And I'm not saying that that's because of Trump. I'm saying that that just happens to be. I think that
I think there's an issue of Trump bringing validation to hidden feelings, things that weren't out in the open. I have distinct memories of watching his little rallies, and someone was protesting. Okay, but Trump made it an issue and then offered to bail anybody out of jail if they
kicked
beat
his
up
ass.
the protester.
Yeah.
And it happened. They didn't get bailed out.
No.
I also don't think they got arrested, but there's a video of the Mr. Cowboy who's in his 60s or whatever punching the guy walking by him.
Right.
There was no previous exchange.
And that never happened.
Past,
but see, here's the thing, though. This isn't what Trump invented. He just perfected it. And it goes back.
He added a validation to this feeling.
Well, and I think
out in the open.
Yeah, and I think that when you look at the hardcore MAGA supporters, a lot of them are blue collar. Okay, a lot of them feel like politically correct language has gone too far, or they feel like pronouns are a step too far, or they feel like gay marriage was a step too far, and all these things. A lot of them thought a black president, that was a step too far, and so what you ended up having, I think, was it started with Gingrich, okay?
Yeah.
It started with Gingrich and the the neocons in Clinton's administration. And then it just continued on. And it became the neocons became the Tea Party. Then the Tea Party became MAGA. So it just kept amping up. It just like, okay, we're going to take it to the next level. But that's what destroys families. That's what divides families, is when you are so determined that you have to always be right and no one else can be right and there's no kind of conversation. And I'm not saying I blame conservatives. I get where you're coming from. In a lot of your arguments, I understand and I can see why you'd be upset by that. But the fact of the matter is, 1965, Paul Harvey calls it out as if he were the devil, that's what he would do. And that to me is interesting. You know what I mean? If I were the devil, I'd have families at war with themselves, churches at war with themselves, and nations at war with themselves. Well, where are we
For all
right
of
now?
this, though, there was that idea that if you're at family dinners, you don't bring up two things:
Religion and
religion and
politics.
politics.
Exactly.
And nowadays, that's all anybody can talk about.
It used to be mixed company too. It wasn't just family dinners. It wasn't just,
Yeah.
holidays and stuff like that. It was, at least in our house, it was meant, or we were taught by the very person who would always break the rule. Lovely Elsie. She would always put herself in these little pickles where she would tell us one thing and then do exactly the opposite and then look at us and go, do as I say, not as I do. Okay, fine.
Which we were not very good at.
No, that.
No.
So, for anyone who wondered why the show was called Elsie's Little Pickles, that's the reason right there.
Yep.
But she did. She would say, you don't do this. And then she would create a circumstance or she would be in a circumstance that was just too delicious for her not to comment or lose her shit over. And then she'd find herself in this pickle of trying to explain to us why we can't do what she just did. Well,
Sure.
65, Paul Harvey, families at war with themselves. Today, churches at war with themselves. All the shit that you even see within just the Catholic Church, as far as like the division between some of the things that the Pope is saying versus what some of the cardinals believe or some of the more traditional Catholics believe. Instead of realizing that what the Pope is doing, he's trying to bring the church into the 21st century and do it a little bit quicker than what they're comfortable with. Okay.
Just a couple of months ago, I'll say the town Brattleboro. We were in Brattleboro for a visit, do a little shopping, a little eating, and I noticed that in front of one of the churches they had a gay flag up,
Mm-hmm.
welcoming anyone. Which I am not religious, but I think that is the decent thing to do, the honorable thing to do. However, there were roughly 10 to 15 people out front from the church down the street, the Baptist church, I do believe,
Mm-hmm.
that were picketing at that church.
Well, that's church against church right there.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And really, look, I mean, my views on it are, if it's not hurting you,
It's none of your business.
it's none of your fucking business. Just leave it alone. It doesn't affect you. Go fuck off and find something else to be upset about. All right. So getting back to what he said here. Let me get to it here.
Well, while you're trying to get to it, let me also bring up the fact that Harvey was really good friends with uh, the FBI director, Hoover, J.
Mm-hmm.
Edgar Hoover. Um, he would willingly submit copies of his radio script for his comment and approval, Hoover's comments and approvals. Um,
Now, did
he
he
was
do that just
also,
because he was friends with him, or did he do that because he felt, given that time frame, especially what was going on as far as like the Red Scare, as far as communism, that he wanted to get approval so that no one would turn an eye to him?
I think it was a look at me, I am doing this willingly. Because Harvey was also very good friends with McCarthy and was very vocal about um, his campaign to expose and expel uh, perceptions of communists in society and government. Something that Vincent Price was vehemently against. One of the reasons why I love Vincent Price.
Well, there's so many reasons to love Vincent
Yeah,
Price.
Vincent Price was a beautiful human being. But yeah, Harvey had some skeletons.
But I wonder if those skeletons were because he felt he needed to out of necessity of the time, or if it was because
Great
of,
question.
yeah.
Anything that I could say would just be pure speculation.
Oh, and same here. I have no idea, but I do have questions about that. Okay, so then he goes on to say, then from the schoolhouses or the schoolhouse, and then from the houses of Congress, and in his own churches, I would substitute psychology for religion and deify science. I would lure priests and pastors into misusing boys and girls and church money. Okay. He knew something was up, right? Because if you look, I actually should have gone back a little bit further. You'd have, when he's talking about schools, you'd have the drug sniffing dogs, metal detectors at every schoolhouse door. And within a decade, I'd have poison or prisons overflowing. I'd have judges promoting pornography. Soon I could evict God from the courthouse, then from the schoolhouse, and then from the houses of Congress. And in his own churches, I would substitute psychology for religion and deify science. Okay, so right out of the gate, 65, I don't, and I might be wrong here, but I don't think there were any fucking metal detectors at school, in any schools at that point.
I do not think so.
Yeah, I mean, again, I could be totally wrong. I don't know, but I just, I
I
don't,
have a hard time thinking they would have the money.
not, well, even if they had the money, I was that technology even fully available at that point? I don't know.
Yeah, I do believe in the 60s they had even metal detectors on like the Rock, Alcatraz.
Okay.
It's a very simple system.
I know it's
It's just a matter of if a school had the budget at that time, which I highly doubt.
okay. And I would imagine also at that particular time, they were incredibly expensive and cost prohibitive.
Probably.
But what do we see nowadays?
Yeah, they're everywhere. They're in your
Fuck it.
hand. Little
Yeah.
handheld metal detectors.
Yeah, they're
I
everywhere.
worked in a school district and we had them.
Yeah, I mean, that's my point is like he's actually
He's calling the shot like Babe Ruth.
exactly. It's the point. And all right, show me what you got. It's going there no matter what you throw.
But abuse of children did not start in this century.
No, I think that was known.
There are popes that have murdered people, folks.
Yeah.
It's a fact.
But
You think they didn't have concubines? Come on.
the idea that he calls it out, I would lure priests and pastors into misusing boys and girls and church money. That's a bold statement in 1965. Whether you know it's going on, whether it's public knowledge it's going on, that story of all the sexual abuse that happened specifically within the Catholic Church, that didn't really break until...
Everybody talks about sexual abuse, but there's also psychological abuse, which I would contend with convincing your child to be afraid of this deity that is hidden in the clouds watching your every fucking move.
Exactly. Exactly.
That
I totally agree with
that's
you. I think
psychologically scarring. I'm sorry. It is the truth.
the idea that parents would brainwash their children from a very early age when they are the most susceptible, especially from the point of view of you're my mom, you're my dad. Every question I have, you have the answer to. You're the smartest person I know. I trust you. You take care of me. I have no reason not to believe you. And to indoctrinate, to brainwash a child into believing in any religion prior to the point of them being able to logically pursue it on their own. I think, honestly, I
You
think it
could
should be illegal for children under 18 to be in churches.
I would support that. I also can draw a point of reference to the um, same thought pattern, which is the belief in Santa Claus. However, that's kind of more fun and frivolous, not you're going to rot and burn in hell for all of eternity and damnation.
I'm on the fence on all that because part of me goes, that's part of, being a kid and part of the
Yeah,
fun of it. And there is um, kind of a frivolity to it that no one really gets harmed. But,
no, no.
but I don't know about you, but when I found out that I was being bullshitted on, Tooth Fairy, Easter Bunny, and fucking Santa Claus, I kind of
I
started looking at
I
mom and dad a little
remember
different.
I remember hearing about the Easter Bunny, and all I could think of is, Christ, we lock the cats in the basement at night so they don't wander around. But there's a fucking bunny that's just shitting jelly beans
And
everywhere and
hiding eggs and
plastic eggs. Like that doesn't seem sanitary at all. And making us find these things for hours.
I
How is
I
this?
actually had a
What's
different
going on? Is this rabbit gonna bite me in my sleep if I'm bad?
I actually had a different take on it. I remember because they would do the Easter bunny at the mall just like they did Santa Claus, right? As a way to make extra money and whatever. Never was there a line to sit on the Easter bunny's lap, but like it was an
Well,
attraction.
you don't want to do that with a symbol of fertility.
What is that? What is that? Is that a carrot in your pocket, or are you just happy to see me?
Easter Bunny, that had better be a couple of eggs in your pocket.
But
Just saying.
again, getting to the point of when I found out, I remember thinking, oh, okay, I can't lie, but these two motherfuckers have been lying to me for 8 years. You know what I mean? Like I remember that kind of like I was a little tweaked. I was a little pissed. Um, and I think rightfully so because I felt like they were lying to me. Anyway, all right. And then from the houses of Congress and in his own churches, I would substitute psychology for religion and deify science. I would lure the priests and pastors into misusing the boys and girls and church money. If I were the devil, I'd make the symbol of Easter an egg. We're just talking about that. I'd make the symbol.
Well,
I'd make the symbol of Easter an egg, and the symbol of Christmas a bottle.
that's the same as saying, I would make the center point of religion a Bible. Uh, Easter and eggs go back before Paul Harvey started his stories. It goes back. I was trying to infer that he had long stories, but the egg and Easter, it's all a symbol of fertility. We talked about this in another podcast. Esther is the name of the goddess of fertility and the dawn, the rebirth of life. It's a symbol of an egg and a rabbit. It's well, a millennia old.
Right.
I mean, the first Easter was not when the Jesus came down from the clouds and was moonwalking towards everybody else. That didn't happen. The first Easter was like 2,500 years ago, folks. Um, it was a celebration of Esther, Estra, if you will,
Mm-hmm.
which some people don't know this, but it's where the origin of the word estrogen for females. Guess where that comes from? But I digress. Go ahead.
I would take from those who have and give to those who wanted until I had killed the incentive of the ambitious. What will you bet I could get whole states to promote gambling as the way to get rich? Well, that's the fucking lottery. I would
Yeah.
caution against extremes in hard work, in patriotism, in moral conduct. I would convince the young that marriage is old fashioned, that swinging is more fun. Okay,
Hey,
let's
sweet.
swing, baby.
All right.
Very Austin
Is
Power.
is is Paul Harvey saying that we should lower the age of warehouse workers and construction workers so that young teenagers can? Because that's already happening out there. I'm looking at you. What is it? Iowa, Idaho. Um, yeah, I don't want some 13-year-old kid who can't make my burger right working on a construction site making my house. That's
Well,
not a good idea.
I don't know that that's necessarily where he was going with that. That's not, at least that's not my take on it. I think what
That's
he
just one of the takes.
Yeah, I think where he was going though was he was trying to, so the in that time communism was the big scare, okay?
Yes, yes.
However, you don't just jump into communism, all right? So let's say you're capitalist, you slide into socialist, socialism slides into communism, okay? That's the ideal as far as like the communist belief system is. You can't just
Well,
jump right in.
no singular system will work. Plain and simple, it has never worked. One system. You got to have a safety net, a yin and yang. It isn't just called yin, and it's just not yang.
No, and I
It's
would agree with that, but I think what he was getting to there was this idea that he feared communism and socialism because ultimately that view of if there's no incentive to work harder, then no one will work harder. Um, the idea that I would caution against extremes in hard work, in patriotism, in moral conduct. I would convince the young that marriage is old fashioned. So basically, what he's saying is, I would convince them that socialism or communism is the way to go. Take away
Mhm.
the incentive to be patriotic. Take away the incentive to be hardworking or innovative, and then on top of it, take away the family the family model. You know what I mean? The nuclear family model, and just have people out there, fucking away, just all day. Fuck, 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 fuck. That's all they do because they're not working. They don't need to. And a lot of people are afraid of that today. That's part of the current concern is, I mean, and you don't even have to have, it doesn't have to be political, but it is. Okay. So I'll give you the example of how it's political. And then I'll give you the example of how it's not going to be political. It's simply going to be some sort of a reality that we have to figure out and deal with as not just a country, but also as a global circumstance.
Mhm.
So the pandemic happened and everyone got um, basically checks from the government. Unfortunately, I didn't get any because we didn't qualify because of our combined income.
Same here.
Um, with that being said, during that period of time, what you saw happen was a lot of people who are that were still working. Maybe they were still considered, or maybe they were considered essential,
Hmm.
but they were on the lower income scale. And now they get this boost of this 1,200 here to this 1,200 there, and now they're actually they've got a little bit of money, and there were a lot of people that took that because they were spending it in ways that maybe they wouldn't have if they didn't have the money, and they were spending it in ways that people who had the money just didn't like. I don't like that you're buying that. I don't think you should buy that. You know what I mean?
I did face some of that. we we had gone to a liquor store and purchased
Liquor?
$600 worth of liquor.
Okay.
We got stuff that we enjoyed. It wasn't like something super special. It was just
These are our
we like to
favorites.
collect. Well, favorite stuff we wanted to try. Like what the hell? And we had a lady behind us in line who was like, "Oh, it must be nice to spend that kind of money from the government." Well, she did not know that we didn't get that money from the government. That was just what we made.
Right.
Um, and again, when I'm confronted in public, it is a, "Do I know you? Then why you fucking talking to me?"
Right.
Because it's gonna be a no. I don't know you. Well, why the fuck are you talking to me?
Yeah, and you don't know what my economic situation is. But
Yeah.
based on your appearance, okay, tattoos all over, long beard,
Yes.
you were probably wearing your overalls. She probably looked at you
Probably.
as somebody that would never be able to make enough to have disposable income to spend $600 on alcohol. And I'll put money on it. She looked like a fucking Karen.
My first thought was inviting her to put her purchases in with ours so that she felt like shit. Like, oh, okay, why don't you put yours with ours? We'll buy them
Yeah,
because I can do that.
I can afford that. You can't, obviously, because, well, you're contemplating my order instead of paying attention to yours. But I do
But
think,
I saw that though also with masks because I wore masks. I had a lady in front of me who had a mask on, and a man told her she was wearing a face diaper and threatened her. And she was legit scared because she was by herself. And little old me standing behind her was like, "Sir, would you like to say that to my face?
mm,
I invite you."
yeah, and
And you'll never believe what happened.
he didn't want to talk to you.
No, no, because he could not push me around like he could push
Right.
her around.
And that's the thing is that's the other thing that I see happening. And I think falls into this idea of what Harvey was saying in 65 is there is this mentality that um and I think it's a punk ass mentality, okay? Anytime
Oh yeah,
somebody, I use the term Karen. I said I bet she looked like a Karen. And that's really not a fair statement, but it is justified in the fact and I don't
I was about to say there's some justification there because the last few years we've
the,
all been seeing the
the
videos
videos, yeah, and they all
of
seem
people
to
just acting out like what is wrong. Like I have a hard time not confronting that uh, with equal aggression. If I don't care about me, I care about other people.
right,
I can take care of myself. There's nothing that that person could say to me that I haven't whispered into a mirror and chuckled at myself.
right.
How mean I can be to myself. Nobody can hurt my feelings. But
When you
there's also
when you
that
punk,
mentality
yeah,
that
that
I
punk
want to
ass.
ask that person, "What's wrong? What's going on that you feel the need to do this? Tell me. I legit want to know. What's wrong?"
That's the thing. Is you well, again, I think this is because we both were raised the same way. My first instinct is to protect the weaker one because I see the more intimidating person in that circumstance as somebody who is dealing with something because they need to feel powerful again. They need to feel
Yes.
stronger. They need to feel, and I've never been really that. person. Like I don't see how making somebody else feel bad can make you feel better or stronger or more in control of your life or whatever.
No.
And you see that, you know, when you're talking about, and again, I don't like the term Karen. I don't, you know, or what's the other one for the guys, Brads or whatever.
I don't know. I've heard Brad. I've heard Kyle's.
Yeah, Kyle's is the one I've heard. Kyle's and Karen's.
Yeah.
And again, I don't. I feel bad
You
for people.
mentioned your name was Kyle and you had a wife named Karen.
Well,
What
that's
do you
it.
do?
And that's my point. Is like I know people who have actually like used their middle name instead. Like at Starbucks, they'll use their middle name and they forget. Fucking coffee sitting there, gets cold.
So
But
yeah, I'm at least enough of an asshole to be like, my name is Kyle, Kyle. Make sure you shout that out.
yeah, shout it out loud. And the last name's
It's like
last name's Karen.
it's like the people that are afraid to buy condoms. I don't understand that.
No, I
Like
used to.
as a teen, be like, those are mine. You
Yeah,
got any extras? Guess
yeah,
what I'm doing later?
yeah. Well, I went through two different stages on that, but that's a different story. I went from because when I started, I was very young, so I would steal them. I would steal them from. I would fucking steal condoms. Anyways, point being here is I feel bad for the people with those names because, you know, a lot of Karens are nice people, but as soon as you say Karen, everyone looks, and if they happen to have that hair, yeah, if they're, you know, they got that bob going, forget it. Everyone is just making assumptions. And that's usually not the case. However, with all that being said, I think there's a lot of people who think or thought, I can't believe my taxpayer money's going to this asshole so he can go and spend $600 on alcohol. Not even knowing the fact that you never got a check, okay? I think that there were a lot of people who were making those decisions and those judgments and had those thoughts and became resentful because they thought it was their taxpayer money going to these motherfuckers. And
I actually had a family member on Facebook block me because she was angry that during the pandemic, people would go out to the grocery store and buy food, like stock up. Okay. And I had like, we'd gone to the store. I posted a picture of a bunch of candy that we bought because we decided to buy candy because we're going to be sitting at home for the weekend.
mm-hmm.
And what goes better than whiskey than some chocolate?
Oh,
Let's be honest.
It's hard to beat whiskey and chocolate and
But
oranges.
we had just bought a lot of oranges.
Oh, I like having a little cutie.
Interesting.
Yeah, I'll have like a little cutie orange, you know?
Oh, we can't get those.
Oh, you can't? No, you got to have the
eat the entire box. I have seen her do it. Just saying. Cuties or what was the halos.
Halos, yeah.
Gone. Yeah.
But
there's an addiction problem.
It goes great with whiskey.
But as I was saying, I had posted a picture like, oh yeah, we got supplies. And I'm just poking fun that we bought a crap load of candy. No other intentions. It's just like,
hey, look at us, we're being silly.
We're adulting.
Yeah.
And that's what actually I said. We're adulting. And apparently this person got angry, unfriended me, and then blocked me. I was like,
over candy.
Really?
Well, really that goes back to family member against family member. You know what I mean? All right. The other example of that though is AI. You know what I mean? And we'll talk about AI in many.
AI is going to take several shows.
That's going to be a lot. Yeah, that's going to be a several part series, I think.
That's going to be a luggage case.
Well, I mean, if you think about it in terms just of this brief conversation, people had a hard time with the government sending checks for the $1,200 as many times as they had to. Okay.
Yeah.
And then they were making decisions on what you were buying, assuming that you were buying it with that money. And that created tension. And, to a degree, I can understand that. But overall, mind your own fucking business. You know what I mean? Like, I didn't ask for this fucking check, but I'm happy I got it. And I get to spend it how I want, and you get to spend yours how you want. So how about you fuck off and leave me alone? When we get to the point of AI, and we're not far from this. You're going to see a lot of people displaced from their jobs. Now, what do you do about that? And it's not, when I say a lot of people, I'm not talking about like, just, low end wage earners. I'm talking about, you're going to see this with highly educated people as well. You're going to see this with, doctors and nurses, and you're going to see this with lawyers, and you're going to see this with.
And there was also the aspect of the public worker, waitresses, servers, anything in that order, who could not go to work, decided to better themselves through education online,
Mm-hmm.
got better jobs when the time came because they prepared themselves, took that opportunity.
Because that was the only
to-
opportunity they ever had. I
yes.
I
And
had.
then everybody was like, "What do you mean you don't want to come back to work for $2.35 an hour as a server? Oh, what, you think you're now an accountant? You can, yeah, yeah. That's exactly.
I met this kid. This kid couldn't have been 23, 24 years old. If ever I'd seen a trailer park rat of a kid, it was this kid.
Mhm.
Right?
No regrets.
No regrets. Right? And at the time, I was selling motorcycles. And he came in, and I'm telling you, like, there was nothing about this kid that said he had any credit at all. So I didn't think he was going to be able to. So now you're a cash buyer or you're out, right? And he's looking at bikes that are way beyond what you would think. But I still took care of him as if he was any other customer. I didn't treat him any differently. Started talking with him, asking him. I was like, okay, what are you looking at? What are you looking for? Blah blah blah. And in the course of that, I'm qualifying him like I would any other customer. So it had nothing to do with his appearance or, quite frankly, his smell. But
Smell you later.
yeah, he was a little ripe, right? He goes, okay, I want that one. And it was like $10,000, right? We're just shy of that. And he looks at me, he goes, do you prefer a cashier's check or would you prefer cash? And I thought, I'm going to see what this kid's got. I go, well, cash would be great if you can do it. He goes, okay, I'll be back tomorrow at 2:00. Have it ready. I'll have the cash for you. Can you write down the total amount so I can make sure I have it exact? Okay. No shit. Next day, kid comes in. I got the bike prepped. I already took a deposit on it, so I had at least the deposit.
Yeah.
Kid comes in with cash. And I go, I'm sorry, man, but I got to ask you, what do you do for a living? He goes, well, before the pandemic, because this was during the pandemic.
Yeah.
He goes, I was a dishwasher at a Chinese restaurant. He goes, I didn't have any hope of ever making more money than that. I had no family that could help me go to school. I had, no step up. No one giving a lift. He goes, pandemic happened. My restaurant closed. I had to figure something else out. He goes, so I started paying attention to crypto. And he goes, I had $60 to my name. That's it. He goes, I had $60 to my name. He goes, I took that $60 and I invested. And I made some good moves because I watched for like 3 weeks straight, he said, all day, every day. I watched every video about investing in crypto. I read every article I could read on investing in crypto. I read everything I could get my hands on, watched everything I could get my eyeballs on. He goes, and then I made my first hesitant investment. He goes, it was only $10. He goes, $10. He goes, I turned that 10 into 20. And then he goes, and then I took the rest of that money that I had and turned that into, he's like $200-300 within a week or whatever it was. He goes, and then I took that money out and kept finding all these other opportunities. And he goes, right now I got, I don't know, he goes, roughly 150,000 sitting in my account, in my crypto accounts. And he did this in like 4 months. Now, maybe he's an idiot savant. You know what I mean? Or maybe he just realized this was his opportunity. He goes, I realized I had to do something. And I also realized I had no fucking skills. So I had to train myself. And he goes, and let me tell you something. If you've got an internet connection, you can educate yourself in anything you fucking want. And I was like, God damn. That's amazing. That's this kid went from $60 fucking dollars, right?
Boss, can I get 4 months off?
And because he had that time off, and instead of just sitting around jerking off all the time, or getting high, or getting drunk, or whatever, he said, I recognize this is my opportunity to educate myself in a way that I will never have again. And this little motherfucker is rich. I mean, like I shouldn't say rich, but for him,
well, yeah, bettered himself.
He bettered himself, and he did that in an incredibly short period of time. So I get annoyed when people say things like, you know, they make the judgment. But when AI comes, okay, you better figure out if you're the one that's going to get replaced. And if you are, you better figure out what you can do. And if you can't, guess what? That's where those fucking government checks are going to be coming from. You know, that, yeah, what do they call it? UBI, Universal Basic Income. But at some point, no matter how you fight that or don't like that, and I get that, I'm not arguing for it. I'm simply stating I believe there will come a point between robotics and AI that there won't be a lot of jobs available. And the jobs that are available will be unlike any job that you know of today. And really, at the end of it, it's going to be, well, if you want to do this, you can do it, but you don't need to. Well, if that's socialism, which many people would say universal basic income is socialism. If that's the case, what's the other option? What's the other option when we create technology that not only is more reliable, never calls off sick, works 24/7. How are you going to, as a human being, compete with that? And I don't care what the job is. It's coming for your job next. So you better get comfortable with the idea that we're going to have to figure something out, whether that's universal basic income, whether that's some sort of socialist, by today's standards, program. Otherwise, you're going to have a bunch of motherfuckers that have no jobs and lose everything and can't live and can't get a job because there aren't no fucking jobs. It's all done by AI.
You know what the beautiful part of AI is?
No.
That you can go pull up a McDonald's app on your phone, fill out your little order. You pull up at the window, they hand you the order, and nobody's judged you based on your order. AI doesn't care. Computers don't care.
Yeah, but the person who's handing you that fucking
sandwich,
like right
Sunday with that
right now, the person who hands you the order goes, "God damn, this is a heavy bag." Holy shit!
That's all right.
How many people are you feeding?
It's just me in the car.
All right, let's see how this.
Is the shake machine on? The ice cream machine on? Because I did order a hot fudge sundae. Yeah, fork it over. Oink oink.
out of this whole thing, I think the one thing that kind of bothers me is marriage is old fashioned and that swinging is more fun. I,
Duh.
yeah, I don't think that's, you don't need the devil. You don't need to be the devil to get that one.
No. Yeah, you know what? You want to convince me that that is devilish or evil or whatever? Get the clergy on board.
Yeah.
Get the clergy on board. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah.
It's like the animal eating meat debate. You want to prove to me that we should, become vegetarians? All right, all the power to you. Just let me know when you convince a lion and a Venus flytrap not to eat meat. Go ahead. That's all I'm asking.
Yeah.
That's all I'm asking.
One's a mammal, one's a fucking plant. But that to me, and it makes me wonder, okay? Like that one to me, the whole idea of swinging, I know that was like a big thing in the 60s. Right? Like the 60s, like late 60s, early 70s, like couples, married couples, whatever. Swinging was the thing back then, wasn't it?
Makes you wonder. Well, at least makes me wonder if there's like a lady like Edith Bunker who's, Arch, is he talking about swing dancing?
Yeah. But see, that's the thing is like if you think about like as kids, all right, at some point,
how long removed was the censorship of showing Elvis below the hips on TV?
but that's my point. That's what I'm saying. Like, let's say swinging like was real popular between we'll say 65 and 75. Okay. So we're going to cover the hippies and disco. All right. Let's say that that's the case. Now I can see that being very, very popular with, single people. All right.
Yeah.
But I'm having a hard time thinking like, well, at that point, Auntie would have been maybe 38, roughly, in that area. Mm-hmm. Maybe a little bit younger. And I'm having a hell of a time picturing our aunt and uncle. But they were kind of hip at that point. You know what I mean? Like they went out a lot. They did a lot. And they had reasons for wanting to go out and party a lot. They participated in different clubs and organizations. They were very much a group kind of think. That's what they liked. They liked
to go down to the Elks Club and do a little swinging.
Yeah, but that's my point is you could have walked into the Elks Club at that time, which they were members. And I mean, I'll be honest with you, I've walked into, Elks Clubs and Moose Clubs and, VFW halls and whatever and had inappropriate comments or propositions come knocking on my door. I can only imagine what it would have been like then, but then you have to picture that, and that's so fucking gross. You know what I mean? Like even
the bleach for my brain.
Even from the point of view of like, okay, in that period of time, you were young and you were, we'll call it good looking for you. You know what I mean? Like, okay.
Let me tell you. Have you ever been to Florida?
Yeah. Several times.
All right.
Many times.
Are you familiar with the Villages?
Exactly. That's my point. That the Villages is a perfect example. They have the highest sexually transmitted disease rate of anywhere in the fucking country. And that's kind
of the upside down pineapple.
Yes. That's the symbol for swinging, for those of you who don't know. So apparently
we drove by and I wanted to take a shower. We're going down the road where the Villages starts, and I was like, I kind of want to. Anybody got any soap? Maybe.
But apparently,
hydrogen peroxide, rubbing alcohol. Anybody?
Okay, so
anybody?
You got to be what?
You
got to be 55. I think is the minimum age to get into the Village.
Correct.
Right. Okay. So I can see the 55 to 65-year-olds knocking boots pretty hard. I could see that happening. Because what are they? Everything's like, everyone's trying to convince themselves, oh, 55 is actually the new, the new 45, and 65 is actually the new 53 and a half, whatever. Okay, you're fucking 55 or you're 65, whatever the fuck you are. All right, doesn't mean you're dead. And now with Viagra especially, but that's the thing. That's the thing is like, okay, yeah, it starts at 55. And there's plenty of good-looking 55-year-old men and women out there. There's plenty of good-looking 60, 65. I'll even go so far as to say there's probably some hardy and robust 70-year-olds. But after that, yeah, I mean, let's face it, a Viagra overdose could lead to broken hips. Right?
I've fallen, but I got it up.
Exactly. I've fallen, but at least I got it up. All the blood ran to the wrong place, and I went too quick in my head, and I fucking fell. I don't know. I think that there's a bit of a hypocrisy on that one, because I think that it goes even to like, the abortion debate, and I'll be real quick with this because again that'll be another show. But the idea that there's a certain group of people who think that the only reason you should have sex is to have children. And there was a time when that was the case, but that was also a time when, you didn't have birth control, or what you had was not great. So you knew you were taking that chance. But now we live in a time.
The Puritans come to mind.
Yeah.
Christmas, you had sex to procreate, and even then, sex in a marriage was still a sinful thing.
But like the people who are,
God forbid, you walked around with a smile at that time.
Oh yeah, but I mean, yeah. What are you doing? Jerking off or fucking your wife?
What's that? A Million Ways to Die in the West.
Great movie. I love that fucking movie.
Dude, look at it. He's smiling in the picture. What an imbecile.
So going to this idea of there's a group of people that have their own ideas and think that their ideas are the only ones that are going to work, but they don't recognize the reality of it. So, example, and I use this only as an example, the people who are against abortion, who claim that they're not against abortion because of religious belief. Okay, I'm going to give you the benefit of the doubt. You say you're an atheist, but you're also pro-life. I'll give you the benefit of the doubt. I'll give you all of it, okay? But at the end of the day, what you're trying to say is that realistically, don't have sex unless you're prepared to have a child. And you're prepared to have a child with that person that you had sex with. Okay, that's never worked. It's never worked. It's never worked. Ever in the history of the fucking world. It's never worked. So what are we doing?
You want to convince me of this? Start with the clergy.
Yeah. Yeah. But I mean, it's just never worked. It's never going to work. So you need to come to terms with the fact that people like to fuck.
That might not be a good assertion because there's a lot of boys that.
Oh, yeah, they usually go for the boys. But the point is that it's never worked. Ever. You know what I mean? In the
You're
history.
Not pregnant, you just have to poop.
It's never worked. You're never going to get people to stop fucking. They like the way it feels. Fucking feels good. You're not going to stop teenagers from fucking. You're not going to stop adults from fucking. You're not going to stop your neighbors from fucking. They're all going to fuck. And whether you want to admit it or not.
Fucking. Well, it's God's first commandment. Keep on fucking. Even a dog can understand it. It's a great song. You're welcome, everybody.
Yeah. All right, let's finish this up here. Um, that what you see on TV is the way to be, and thus I could undress you in public and I could lure you into bed with diseases for which there are no cure. In other words, if I were the devil, I would just keep right on doing what he's doing. If I were the devil, I'd just keep doing what he is doing. If I were the devil, I would just keep doing what he's doing. And he repeats that several times. Okay. So,
It's also important to understand, I do believe Paul Harvey came from a family that went back like 6 generations of Baptist ministers.
and that might be but I don't look at it from the point of view of what he is saying is necessarily in, even though he's talking about the devil and he's talking about, what he considers to be moral decay in this. And he's using the devil as the device. I don't I don't care about any of that. I look at that and I go, wow, there's a lot of lines we can draw from that to today. You know what I mean? There's just a lot of lines. Okay,
There are.
I just that last one. Uh, I would undress you in public, and I could lure you into bed with diseases for which there are no cure. Well, we had that happen with AIDS. Not too long after.
Well, there's been a lot of diseases, but they get cures. That's the one beautiful thing about science technology.
No, I
You know?
agree, but you weren't really aware of it at that time, but trust me, when I was becoming, when I was going through high school especially, and lots of opportunity to have sex and party and all the things you do as a teenager. We were all terrified about AIDS. You know what I
I'm
mean?
sure.
Because there was
Even
no cure at that
even
time.
when I was in school, there was a lot of hype and a lot of fear. But
Yeah,
at the
I
same
mean, well,
time,
but they were scaring the shit out of us too. I mean, it wasn't.
well, I'm sure they were trying back
Yeah,
then.
they were purposefully scaring the
Did they
shit out of
write
us.
things like into stone and pass that around
What?
at your age?
Yeah, yeah. That's how old I am. Fucking Moses was. They didn't have a ditto machine. They didn't have a copy
Oh no.
machine. No, no, no. It was just some guy with a fucking rock and a chisel and a hammer. And he's like,
Ah, crap! I made a typo.
yeah.
Where
But the
is it?
bitch of it was
Let me start again.
the bitch of it was I was at the front of the class, so I got the big stack, and I had to keep passing them back.
I have come down from the mountain, and God has spoken to me and given me 15,
Whoops.
10.
So,
Again, Mel Brooks. I love you, Mel Brooks.
he's the greatest that's ever lived. So I guess my question to you is this: do you see this as something that is just um, interestingly universal for
Well, yeah.
for different periods of time, or do you see this as more like, holy shit, what kind of prophet was Paul Harvey?
Well, it goes back again to generational ideas. Also, I can't stress this enough, but the oversimplification of complex issues. These issues have always been, they always will be. I'm not minimizing it, but rather explaining what is will always be. Simple as that. I mean, there's that saying, the what is it, the greatest con that Satan ever committed was convincing people he didn't exist.
Right.
I'm sure that saying was around back then, which is probably why he wrote this. But I would also ask, could the greatest grift ever been was God convincing people he did exist?
Oh, I would say so.
Just saying.
But I think I think when you get down to the idea of um, specifically, the Christian God devil dilemma, but I think it goes for any any deity, any, good, bad, or otherwise, any religion that has that kind of identifying creator and destroyer. Um, it was our first attempt. You know what I mean? And it stuck. It was our first attempt at explaining shit. It was our first attempt at understanding the world that we lived in. It was our first attempt at science. It was our first attempt at, like, you can go across the board. Everything that every religion kind of represents is based on previous attempts that are refined.
Yes.
But if you take it all the way back to its actual origin, fucking little gathering of nomadic people who are trying to understand why a fucking tornado just took Timmy. You know what I mean? Like,
Not Timmy.
Timmy.
Well, again, the human brain and superstitions is very strong to this day. People have a need to try to explain why bad things happen to
Good
good
people.
people,
Yeah, exactly.
why great things happen to bad people.
It's just that's I don't think people can wrap their heads around the fact that, you know what? Sometimes it's just you're the right person at the right time. Sometimes you're the right person at the wrong time. Sometimes just bad shit happens. There's no evil behind it. It's heartbreaking, sure. It's devastating to your family, but there's no nefarious purpose or reasoning behind it. It just fucking happened. And that's the
Like when
hardest thing to
someone,
accept.
we went through this when mom died. People were like, "Oh, it was just her time." Oh, I can't believe that happened. Really? Because everybody dies.
Mhm.
It's called life. Nobody gets out alive. Um, I caught myself at one point saying, "Well, we all have a terminal disease. It's called life." Um,
And people had a hard time taking some of our responses when it came to that.
yes, yes.
Yeah, and I think, just to
And
kind of
I'm a firm believer. You know what? When mom died, she had some anger issues because of the situation she was in. She didn't like it. I'm pretty sure that the majority of human beings are not going to be like, "Yay, let's die."
right,
Um, but at the same time, to know mom at a personal level, knew that if she truly did feel that if you were going to remember her, she'd want you to laugh about something.
right.
And we took that to heart. Unfortunately, some people didn't.
No, a lot of people actually, I think that I
When you
know.
explain it, people got it.
Yeah, but there were people that I thought should have known.
Yeah.
You know what I
This,
mean? That kind of gave me a stink eye when I said this, that, or the other thing, and I'm like, you don't understand. This is not something that came to us as a surprise. We've had a very long time to come to terms with this.
yes.
And we just were raised different. You know what I mean? Like we were just raised differently when it came to the idea of death. Not to fear it, not to be freaked out by it, not to be freaked out by uncomfortable situations or change or all these different things. These were all great lessons that, not just from mom, but dad too. More so mom, I think, because she was much more of a free thinker, and what
Yes.
she had the intention of being good and the impulse
Yes.
of being bad. You know what I
And
mean?
sometimes it was a lot of fun.
And a lot of times that was really enjoyable. That was actually some of my best memories were, when she would go fucking off script, when she would go off reservation, when she would lose her shit, if it was happening to somebody else. You
If
know
it
what I
was
mean?
happening to somebody else.
It was
Most
always
definitely.
always a riot because it was like, because I don't know about you, but there are many times where it was like somebody would say something to her, and
And it's a
yeah, I'd be like, oh shit, I better get some popcorn because this is gonna be a good one. And she would just go apeshit, and she didn't care who it was. It didn't matter who it was.
no, it didn't.
It
It
didn't
did not
matter.
matter.
It didn't matter if it was a doctor, a lawyer, a fucking principal, a teacher, a pastor. I've watched mom literally lose her shit with everybody who dared cross the path, and she put a very firm line in the sand. You know what I mean? And if they crossed it, she'd lose her shit. But I think,
Especially when it came to us.
oh yeah, yeah, very
If a
very
teacher
mama bear,
or yeah,
very mama bear.
oh yeah, yeah,
But again, that's why I think, like, the idea of this thing, not just what Paul Harvey wrote, which I think is just fascinating in and of itself, because there's just so many things and parallels to today.
yeah. It carries today because we still have the same problems just as they did, and the generation before then.
Yeah.
Um,
But I think that it does boil down to people viewing everything in the world through the religious lens are
yes,
are especially today, because I'm kind of on the fence on how I feel about it, but I think that there are less people who are going to church and are fanatical in their belief system, but those who are going are extra fanatical in their belief system. And all I honestly see is a couple things. One, the need to feel superior, the
yes,
need to have control over what they feel they don't have control over, which, whether that's, somebody in line in front of them buying $600 worth of liquor,
you know,
or somebody
it
getting an abortion that and they disagree with them getting an abortion, or any number of things, that it's that
it
loss of
reminds
control.
me of the Salem witch trials. A lot of the accusations from other people, it was like dominoes. I got accused, so now I'm going to accuse somebody else that I don't like.
Right.
Generally, it was about, well, this person owes me X amount of money. They can't pay me right away, but we had an agreement that they would pay me by this time. I'm not going to wait. I want their land back, or
Right.
I just want their land.
Right.
And you want to talk about power back in the Puritan days? Land was everything, much
Absolutely.
like today.
But again, going to the point of why, whether it's what Paul Harvey says here, or whether it's people losing their mind on a topic on social media, or having, everyone's trying to grasp a little bit of comfort and control, but in the end, whether it's the ultra religious or it's the non religious who's just spouting off online, everyone's
Yeah.
trying to gain something from that, whether it's making them feel like they're self-important, whether it's I'm right, you're wrong, whether it's, but ultimately, it's just because they're all afraid of dying. You know what I mean? Like, to bring it back around to what people were dealing with when we were the ones that they felt they had to console, and we weren't
Yeah.
in need of consolation. We weren't there. We didn't
Mm,
need the hug. We were there to give the hug for
yeah.
them,
Yeah.
and they didn't understand how to, like, there was a lot of confusion and eyes going crossed, and like, you're giving me comfort, you lost your mother, you know. Like, yeah, yeah, should have happened about 6 months ago, actually. Should have happened maybe even 6 years ago.
Yeah.
um we've come to terms with this.
Well,
We're here to
obviously,
support
there's
you.
a point in time where you don't want to see your family member or mother for that matter, in that type of pain,
Right.
constantly, consistently, always in agony.
Right.
Um, a friend of mine was like, "Are you telling me you didn't shed a single tear for your mother?" No, I didn't.
Neither did I.
It's not that I don't miss her.
No.
It's not that I don't love her. It's that you saying that did not spend time with her where she was moaning in agony constantly.
Right.
She would start crying because she was in so much pain. Um, that pain is no longer here.
At least for her. But
Yeah.
again, this goes back to what I'm saying, and it's the fear of dying. It's the need to control. It's the fear of change. It's all those things. I look at what Paul Harvey said. And I think it's fascinating. I think it's fascinating, not so much because you can draw lines to current issues today, though that's one reason I find it fascinating. I find it fascinating because it seems to me that in what he wrote there,
Hmm.
it kind of sums up all of the fears that everyone's going through at all different times. And I guess my point is, if you can remove the fear and accept things aren't always going to go your way, bad things happen,
Yes.
and there may not be a rhyme or a reason to it. And okay, if saying the devil made it happen gives you some sort of solace or comfort, great. But don't try to tell me that. And that was one of the things that I
Let,
felt.
let, let me ask you this.
Yeah.
There has been talk about technology advances. And I won't bring up his name yet because I want to do an entire show on him.
Okay.
But he had mentioned how we are already getting glimpses of what animals dream about, like visually on screens. And he had said that by the 2040s, 2050s, probably, we'll be at that point where we'll be able to upload our consciousness into a system that's kind of like the Star Trek
Hologram
thing,
room.
a hollow suite
Yeah, the
where
hollow
you can
suite.
keep going on, and it's whatever you create. Um, and so my question is, if you were given that option, would you?
God, I'd have to know more detail on that. But my first instinct is to say no. And I'll tell you,
Really?
yeah. And I'll tell you why. It
No,
would.
don't tell me. I'm just fucking with
You
you.
fucker.
I knew you were gonna expect that. What?
So the reason that my first instinct is to say no is I've actually years back I had a very very in depth and lengthy conversation with somebody about if you could live forever, would you? And I thought about it for a very long time, and I came to the conclusion I would not. And the reason was because ultimately you're going to uh, you're always going to end up alone. You're going to lose so every relationship you enter into at any point through that, you're entering it knowing that they're going to die and you're going to live on. So that
Well, my
changes.
answer to that is that if you are capable of uploading your consciousness, there's actually a TV show about this, which is pretty funny. But why couldn't the people around you?
Well, they may be able to. Okay, but that's why I said my first instinct is to say no, because is that based on income? Is that just a service that you get? Is that instead of paying for a funeral, you're able to take the same amount of money and pay to be uploaded into this machine? And then what is it like for you? Are you still you?
No, why
Or,
wouldn't you be you?
well, I don't know. That's why I'm saying. Like, how does consciousness, so let's say it is like hologram, like holographic, okay?
Hmm.
How does a person's conscious get to be able to adapt to that. You know what I mean? Like what's the time frame for you to go, okay, I'm not a living person anymore. I'm a holographic person. And is it only up until the point of where your download ends? Like, are you just relating in that form? Or are you able to uh continuously learn new things, continuously
Oh, yeah.
evolve your opinions? You know what I mean? Like
You have
all those
the
things.
library of the internet.
Well, again, all of those things would dictate what my final answer would be, but ultimately I still think that the idea of living, well, let's call it forever in this upload system until there's a power outage. You know what I mean?
Well,
Like,
I'm sure by then they would have backups.
I'm sure they would have backups. That's not my point. My point is let's say,
Oh, I lost the thumb drive. Oh, Steve's gone.
I'm saying let's say that there is yeah, I lost the thumb. Where's the Steve thumb drive? Ah, fuck. Check between the seats in the car. Um, but there is that kind of idea of, all right, so what does it mean to live in there? You know what I mean? Like, what does it actually mean? Are you able to still enjoy the idea of living, knowing that there's no consequence? You know, there is something, in my opinion, there is something to be said for the fact that whether you consciously recognize it on a daily basis or you don't, you never know when your time's up. So you might as well try to live your best and enjoy as much as you possibly can, because you could step off a curb and get hit by a bus, you know? So
This
there's a
is true.
certain level of um,
For the
positive
record,
positive
I would do it in a
anxiety.
heartbeat.
You would?
Yeah, absolutely. Just because of curiosity. I'm the guy that wants to jump into the 23rd, 24th century,
Oh,
see
I
what's
would.
going on.
If
Uh,
those questions were answered, you know what I mean, and I would consider it. But that, I would say, that would be something else that you'd have to have as an option. You'd have to have, like, every decade or every, century or whatever, you'd have to have this. Do you want to renew or do you want to delete the file? You know what I
yeah,
mean?
I
And
think you would have that option.
I think if that were something you had an option for,
Just, just don't pull a. This is really cool. Hey, oh
oh
crap!
fuck,
Like,
blank. But I do think that you would need to have the knowledge that there was a way you could make it stop if it became too much. You know what I
yeah,
mean? So, providing all of those boxes were ticked, then yeah, I'd be very curious. Um, but again, what does it mean? What is that? I mean, are you just the ghost in the machine? Are you able, how are you interacting with other ghosts in the machine? Do you, like, what's the
I'm a
protocols?
ghost. Ooh.
But yeah, for me, that would be, without a lot more detail, it'd be a hard no. And if all the boxes were checked, it would be, yeah, fuck yeah, I'm in. So like I said, I'm on the fence about it. But I've had that conversation, in regards to biologically being able to live as long as you want, because the conversation was about all the advances that are being made in medicine and how within, I forget what the prediction was, but let's call it 50 years, we'll be able to live up to potentially 160 years old. And I thought about that and I thought, fuck that. You know what I mean? Are you kidding? Now, if you tell me that I can live to
Yeah.
160 years old, but but I'm going to be able to have at least the health, if not the overall appearance of a 30-year-old, 35-year-old, where
Well, yeah, you're talking quality of life at that
very much. So that's where kind of a little bit of the difference is on that opinion. In the simulation or in the machine, well, yeah, you could absolutely have your hologram age modified to whatever you want. And there would be no issue with quality of life because you're a fucking hologram.
Yep.
So that wouldn't be an issue in that. And that actually would be a little bit more attractive to me.
Well, I think
However,
you'd be able to control your the way you looked. You know, go back to when you're in your 30s.
well, again, that's what I'm saying is if you were able to make a lot of those decisions yourself, then I would be definitely interested. But if
Think of all the wonderful. Hey, Steve, it's Thanksgiving.
fuck
Got a
that,
turkey.
yeah, no, thank you. That would be. How do I get to that delete button? So, all right, with that, I think we should probably put a pin in it. But I think it's an interesting question. I think maybe that's a future idea to talk about a little bit deeper.
We're gonna dig deeper on that, and also nanotechnology.
That's something I'm fascinated by.
Yes.
Nanotechnology, AI. I still want to get into more on disclosure. There's a lot of things, and I think that's maybe why this Paul Harvey thing resonated with me so much, is because there seems to be just so much. It's just so much. You know what I mean? Like everything that's going on, whether it's politics, whether it's, aliens and disclosure, whether it's AI or nanotechnology or supercomputing or, fuck, the war here, the war there, Palestine, Jews and, Russians and this and the fuck. Like you can't wrap your head around any of it.
There's so much going on. I don't know what's going on.
That's where, and I think that's the reason why you see the uptick. Yes, we talked about it being kind of like launched by COVID with the increase in alcohol and drug usage, and marriages falling apart and people just not being nice anymore and attitudes changing and like they
Right
forgot
off,
how to behave and
right off the top of your head, I'm gonna end it with this. I got one question for you. You can eliminate two things from this world. What are they?
oh, I can eliminate two things from this world.
Yeah, completely eliminate two things from this world. And we'll end it on that.
Definitely, I think one would be a like war. And
Okay.
uh, oh yeah, definitely war. Because I think that's a self fulfilling prophecy. The companies make the war machines. The war machine or the governments buy the war machines. They build up the inventory. We got too much inventory. Who can we blow up? And the
Well, I
second,
didn't want you to get into deep diving. Just two things.
so the first would be war, and the second one would be hunger. I don't
Hunger.
I
Yes.
don't think that in this day and age anyone should go hungry.
I would eliminate religion and addiction. And we'll end it there because we're going to discuss that in the next episode.
Sweet. See you later.
Later. And that's the end of the story.